Earlier this morning, police in Texas announced that, quote, several people are under arrest in connection with the mass shooting that left 5 people dead, including a child. Officials tracked down the man accused of carrying out the attack. His name is Francisco Oropesa. After they received the tip yesterday, the suspect's immigration status has been called into question. CBS News has learned he was deported back to Mexico in 2009 and was removed several times over the next several years. Joining us now to talk more about this is CBS News political analyst and Republican strategist Leslie Sanchez and CBS News political contributor and chief communications officer for MoveOn, Joel Payne. Thank you both for joining us. Leslie, as you know, some Republican lawmakers are looking to link this shooting to the Biden administration's policy. It's interesting to me that the governor of Texas would, in a tweet, say, which turned out to be erroneous, that these victims were illegal immigrants in the United States. What's the strategy behind language like that? I mean, they're dead. Sadly, tragically, there is no immigration status after you pass into the next life. Why would the governor even point that out?
I think it's important, Vlad, to be fair on this in the sense that the governor, apologized for that tweet and that characterization. I mean, human life is human life. Nobody cares about your immigration status. Fundamentally, we can all agree on that because that dehumanizes people, and that's not the objective. I think the objective, especially for whether you be the governor of Texas, local municipalities, homeowners, ranchers, people that deal with the border crisis every day, is that there is no national Mexican database like you have in the United States of criminal histories, where people have a really strong sense of who is coming into the country. And the failed immigration policies over many decades have compounded the risk for Texas and for anybody that lives along the U.S.-Mexico border. And I think that's the frustration. And it's reaching a very hot tipping point, and especially with the end of Title 42 and all of the implications of that. So this is going to only exacerbate the situation in terms of the concern, the panic. I've been on the phone this morning with ranchers and some local law enforcement who are very concerned about the next couple of weeks, and they feel that the tide is tipping and not in the U.S. favor.
Joel, what's the Democrats' response to the shooting focused on?
Well, obviously horror and just grief over the terrible human tragedy that we saw on display here. I'm so glad to hear my friend Leslie speak with clarity about the importance of respect for human life and humanity. And I think a lot of folks in her party would be well served to follow her lead there. That was incredibly not just disappointing, but that was outrageous from Governor Abbott to put that characterization out. I think in terms of your question about what Democrats are concerned about, obviously immigration is an important issue for the president and for his party to be focused on. But I also think it would be important to not miss public safety, but maybe more precisely gun safety here. The pervasiveness, the permissiveness of our gun culture in this country. We see examples of this every day. And I think this terrible human tragedy that was on display here in Texas is another example of it. I think the president has tried to lead, but there's obviously limitations on what he can do from the Oval Office.
Yeah, and Joel, as Leslie points out, the way that the shooting is being framed by some legislators around the Biden administration, but both of you know that immigration has been a source of concern for successive administrations, both Republican and Democrat. And I suspect that most Democrats and Republicans want to find a solution. Of course, there are extremes in both parties that may be throwing things out there, and they may have a bullhorn, a loud bullhorn on social media to espouse some of those extremist positions. But how could President Biden make this an issue for his reelection campaign in 2024 that could actually, I'm not suggesting that Republicans would support the president, but at least get some buy-in from Republicans from the other side of the aisle?
Well, I think that's to me, Vlad. I would just say earnest, good faith engagement on this issue, I think, is important. I think people need to believe that all parties are operating in good faith. It's been about a decade, maybe even more, since we've had that kind of good faith discussion. And there's certainly responsibility on both sides. I'd say of late, it's very hard when you have a Republican Party that's controlled by an extreme MAGA base that tends to demagogue these issues, demagogue people who are not from this country. It's really hard to have a sane political conversation about this. obviously, this is also a challenge for the president. We're coming up on a cliff here related to Title 42. Related to key immigration policy. Obviously, the president made news this week by sending troops to the border. I think these are piecemeal solutions, but he and his allies would I think, acknowledge that without a comprehensive solution in hand, we are really just kind of sticking our finger in the dam. We're not really comprehensively solving the problem. And I think until this becomes a good faith, common sense, earnest discussion, that everybody can engage in, I think we're going to unfortunately be on this hamster wheel in this very disappointing cycle of inaction.
Leslie, there have been kind of bipartisan coalitions trying to overhaul the immigration policies here in this country. And at times, you know, Republicans on those panels have faced some serious criticism from their own party. At where we're at now, is there middle ground? Are there things that both Democrats and Republicans agree on beyond the fact that the immigration system needs an overhaul that could start the conversation?
I do believe there is common ground, Anne-Marie. Fundamentally, there's been a long conversation about legalization versus U.S. citizenship. That's where the kind of the friction points are. I think there is common ground for a legalization of undocumented immigrants who are in the United States to find a way to legally become part of the system, pay their taxes, be known who they are, where they are, who their families are within the United States. There's a lot of concern in the immigrant community about a fair response from the federal government, but I would say that's a start. But where the agreement needs to be tied is on this issue of a porous border. Republicans are going to argue Democrats want open borders. These Band-Aid solutions, I thought Joel characterized it extremely well, the finger in the dam. That's exactly right. 1,500 troops going to the border today, but removed 90 days later. That's a false hope. That's not a realistic solution. Finding a way to secure the border and not politicizing it to the extent that Democrats, when they were in leadership, were criticizing Trump, a former president, for putting, active duty military on the border, saying they were militarizing it. And now you see it happening today under the Democrats. There needs to be a fair conversation. But let's not forget the vulnerable people here. There are vulnerable and victimized immigrants who do come in and get lost in the United States because they cannot be part of our system. So on both sides of the aisle, there's a tremendous urgency today to start those conversations and make that move forward.
All right, Leslie Sanchez and Joel Payne, thank you so much, guys.